This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
To the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Welcome back, you beautiful people here. January 10th on the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined, as always, by Matthew Ball Knower Betz.
This does feel like that kind of slate, doesn't it? Where you can just really buckle the chin strap, hand in the dirt, really get into the nitty gritty of all these games because there's only 6. And if you're playing the Saturday 2-game slate, let me check my math here. That's only 2. So trying to uncover some edges here, not just from a projection standpoint or looking at like lines and totals, has been a thoughtful experience. It's been fun. I've really dug into this stuff. I know you have too. And hopefully we can give the people a little bit of advice on how to attack these matchups because we got some really exciting ones on this slate and some that, might be a little bit of a grind. So we'll talk about it today, but I'm excited, man. Wildcard slate, wildcard weekend, always very, very fun because you can play whatever you want, whether it's the Saturday slate only, Sunday only, the 6-game showdown for every one of these contests. Like no matter what you like to play, they have it for you on the DFS site. So it should be a ton of fun.
I've been in the lab over the last day or two. And by the lab, I've been watching all 22 film of Russ Wilson. So you tell me where I'm at.
How was that viewing experience?
Okay, so I have to rewind and remember this was not just like an all-pro, not just like a good quarterback, like an all-time efficient quarterback for the first decade of his career. We have to remember how outlier this player was for so many years. And then we remember okay, this is what he's devolved into as a person, as a meme, and everything else. And then you kind of think, man, the Steelers over the last month have been doo-doo. They've lost 4 straight.
Unwatchable.
It's been bad. So when we talk about that game, Ravens and Steelers, we have to give it in context of here's what's happened. I think this year we've tried to emphasize this more. And the guys emphasize it a lot. Whenever they talk about matchups on the main show, we usually talk about here's where they are, schedule adjusted fantasy points, and here's where they are over the last 6 weeks. Going into the playoffs, I think it's really important to analyze some of these teams and see this is what they are. Like the Texans. When we talk about the Texans, this is a very different version than what we saw at the beginning of the year. Nico was hurt for a while. Nico's back, and now it's basically just Nico and a bunch of other dudes running around. So I think the context of talking about these teams and where they're at heading into Wildcard Weekend, which, did you know it's not called Super Wildcard Weekend anymore?
Oh, they changed that.
Yeah, I read an article where simply they were asked about it and they're like, yeah, we didn't make an announcement. We're just not calling that anymore.
Good to know. I guess this weekend won't be as exciting as previously advertised.
Not super at all. That's what they're telling me. But I think the branding, I think it just cost them a lot to add in an extra word to your branding. I'm sure it's really expensive. When we added and betting to this podcast, billions of dollars we spent.
If only the NFL had money to go around, but they're struggling. They're struggling with funds these days. So I get it.
Yeah, you got to cut your corners every once in a while. Speaking of cutting corners, our company has still decided to do this. If you've been riding with us for a while, they mentioned this on the main show, talked about it on the Dynasty podcast. And then what's funny is we're the last ones to bring this up. I don't know if you realize that our podcast comes out Friday. We're still going throughout the playoffs. We are the ones most affected by this in these huge budget cuts. Because that's what
Correct.
It is, really. At the end of the day, it's just HR slashing prices beginning of the year, 2025, and saying, what can we cut? All right, here's what we're going to do. Let's cut all of our proceeds that goes to our, 2 people that host this show. So the DFS pass is free for the rest of the playoffs.
That was such a great transition. Speaking of cutting corners, our company, we're really selling it here, Kyle. Yes, we do this. We've done it like 5 years in a row, something like that.
I
The
hate
DFS
it.
Pass is, we hate it. We hate it. But it's free, and it's really an opportunity for people that have wanted to try it all year, whether financially you couldn't or just weren't interested at the time because you were focused on your home league or whatever. Now is the time. This is pretty much all that's going on in fantasy world is DFS. So come try it out with us. You get our articles, the optimizer, the roster percentage report. We're not taking as many props as we did in the regular season just because there's less games, but we're still taking player props. All that stuff is free. So yeah, check it out at dfspass.com and make some money here in the new year.
Yeah, and it doesn't actually require you to do anything other than sign up through your email. So whether you got,
you need your address, your social, your phone number, your birthday, but other than that, you don't need anything.
And the thing is like I could find any person's out there. I could find your stuff. I know how to Google it.
Is that a threat, Kyle?
Maybe. If you're out there, I'll find you. I'll do some super sleuthing. But yeah, all it is, you just sign up and you can be part of our group. You can even access the Discord. So I saw some people in there. They're like, hey, how do I get access to props? Hey, you're in for the playoffs and you get to learn DFS around a lot of people that are super smart in there and be a part of our little crew. So I highly recommend, if you're sad that football's over, news alert, it is not over, especially for those that play DFS and want to learn the game that way. So dfspass.com, the only thing stopping you from going there is you, because it's free right now if you want to get in on that. So moving on.
State of the main slate.
So Betz and I on this podcast are going to talk about the playoff games for the wildcard weekend, but there's a couple of different ways to break down how you play this in DFS. So you can play the 2-game Saturday slate, which is the Chargers at the Texans and the Steelers at the Ravens. If you want to play that way, we'll talk about it that way. If you want to play Sunday only, there are 3 games: Broncos and Bills, Packers and Eagles, Commanders and Buccaneers. You can play 3-game, and then Monday night, we are going to treat that as if it is just a showdown slate. So Minnesota and Los Angeles, the Rams, that will be on Monday night. But the analysis we give on this podcast, you can really tailor it to whatever slate you want. So any overarching thoughts you have for smaller slates and then how people want to play it?
Yeah, I think when you look at the slate, if you're analyzing this from a 6-game slate, it will feel like a small main slate. Like I remember, 3 weeks ago, something like that, we had like an 8-game main slate on a Sunday. That will feel very similar to that as far as number of games to pick from, ways to stack it. You can get more kind of specific with your stacks. When the slates get smaller, 2 games, 3 games, the rules kind of go out the window. And I think about back to the Christmas Day slate that we talked about. I think a lot of people on these small slates really want to treat it like a normal slate where they want to get exposure to every team. They don't want to play 2 running backs from the same game. They don't want to play players against their defense. Like if you restrict yourself to those normal rules that you would do on like a 10-game slate, you're going to miss out on a lot of lineups that could cash and actually could win some money. On that Christmas slate specifically, like if you told yourself you had to have Texans and you had to have Steelers, you probably didn't do very well. Like if you just rolled with onslaughts of Chiefs and Ravens, you probably had a great week. And I think there are some game environments like that today that we'll talk about where, maybe you don't need Steelers again on this slate or something like that. So definitely loosen up the rules if you're using an optimizer, and definitely don't feel like you have to get exposure to each team and get a player from each game. Sometimes these onslaughts actually are the best way to play it, especially if the spread suggests that. So I like these 2-game slates. It's a different strategy. It's a different game compared to what we're used to. But yeah, these smaller slates are definitely a bit of a different a challenge for sure.
Yeah, the headline, like you mentioned, is just we can't use the usual rules that we do for roster construction and roster percentages. So if you look in our optimizer, which if you want to, it's free, you can play around with our optimizer. The normal roster percentages that we have out there will not look the same because it's a smaller slate, and some of the plays will condense. So for instance, we talk about the Saturday slates like, well, Derrick Henry is the running back. And although he's expensive and you might want to get cute, at the end of the day, if Derrick Henry puts up, 15 points, we would normally be kind of sad to pay up $8,000, plus and on DK and only get 15 points. That might be what you need on this slate because raw points really do matter. So you have to talk about it a little bit differently, and we'll talk about these games. Baltimore is basically a double-digit favorite at home. and Derrick Henry's there. So if you expect them to win, we know what Derrick Henry does in games where they win over time. So think about that. Think about some unique combinations. Like I was looking at the Bills, and we'll talk about that game in a second, but it wouldn't shock me if Mac Hollins was the one who caught a touchdown, or Dawson Knox was the one. I mean, they're the way that they diffuse their wide receivers and tight ends, it's just like across the board, it's so flat, the distribution. So if it's Keon Coleman that catches a touchdown, sure. Khalil Shakir is clearly the easiest for us to project and look and see the matchup in the slot and say, this is a good matchup for him. Play Khalil Shakir, he's good at his price point. But it wouldn't shock me if what you actually needed was Mac Hollins, who catches a touchdown, does his thing, and that's actually what's key on this slate is the money that you save from Mac Hollins, actually you're able to pay up somewhere else. So any last thoughts about unique combinations and what you need on this slate?
I also think too, like it can be a little bit, kind of going back to the stacking thing, like it can be a little bit, give you an uneasy feeling to be like, I'm going all in on this team. And an example of that is like on previous Joe Burrow slates, the small slates. It's like if you played Burrow and Chase and Higgins and Gesicki and maybe even Yoshivas, like you just bet on Burrow and that's what you needed was the Cincy pass game, you probably did very well. I think back to, I think it was like week 16, maybe week 15 slate where the Cardinals played the Rams on that Saturday night game and didn't really need anybody besides Trey McBride in that game. Like those sort of things just happen. So definitely don't be afraid to overstack, I will say. And also think about your lineup. Like you don't need what you normally need on a slate to win. Depending on how the slate shakes out, 130, 140 points, like might be enough to bring home a tournament, depending on the size. On a main slate, you need like 215, 220 if you're playing the lottos. So you don't need perfection. Sometimes you just need points. And I think the field sometimes kind of overthinks that a little bit, where these small slates, like I said, do present a bit of a unique challenge.
Yeah. If you want to get all of our prices, like I did a first look article, Betz did a Vegas report, all of those picks from the DFS pass. Like I had to get my head around what players are on this slate. Like, okay, here's the running backs. Here's the pool of running backs I have to choose from. If I'm playing a 2-game slate or 3-game slate, this is what I need. Like I can get cute in my combinations, but at the end of the day, like I need to figure out at running back, there's really only 2 or 3 plays maybe that are projecting in a way that I want. Now, there could be somebody that comes out of nowhere and gets a goal line touchdown, but those are the kind of things that you have to be aware of. And then I think the Sunday slate, there's just more fantasy relevant games and the totals are higher. So if you wanted to play the Sunday slate and go big on that one just, there's a lot of fun. I did want to check in how you're feeling about your Eagles right now at home against Packers. It was 4.5 last time I saw it.
Yeah, that's what I saw as well. 4.5. I feel good. I feel pretty confident in the Eagles this week, which, when's the last time that ever let you down in the playoffs? A Philly sports team in the playoffs, they never let you down. It's an interesting situation because I feel like most times teams that make a run in the postseason, they're just like the healthy teams, like the Texans are limping in here. The Steelers have got some issues, et cetera, et cetera. It kind of goes down the list. If Jalen Hurts plays in this game, which as of our recording, we assume he will clear protocol, all 22 starters are healthy for the Eagles, which is just a huge advantage against a quarterback who's battling a minor elbow injury, no Christian Watson. They've got some injuries on the defensive side of the ball. So I do feel good about the Eagles this week. We'll talk about that game here in a bit.
It is crazy. The vibes-based analysis is Steelers have lost 4 in a row. They're just stumbling in. They've already gotten ripped apart by the Ravens. It's not good. The vibes are not good there. And you look around on some of these other teams, like things could not be better. Even like the Commanders and Buccaneers, it's like both those teams, you're just so happy for them. They're in the playoffs. They've got a fun team, and one of those teams is going to go home. So it is interesting. I did have some big Falcons news. I don't know if you saw this. This came out today.
Oh, what's that?
Yeah, it's the Falcons are signaling to the league that if you want Kirk Cousins, you'll have to trade for his contract.
Come and get him. I love that. What? Chestnut checkers.
They're just sitting there like, man, what do we put out there publicly to these people, these reporters that just lets everyone know, hey, we mean business. Come and get Kirk.
Dude, the Falcons, it's their world, man. We're all living in it. They're just running circles around the rest of the NFL.
They think that everyone actually cares. Like, Falcons fan, it's my life. No one gives a crap, man. No one gives a crap about this team. They are so irrelevant. Their stadium is not a big deal to the rest of the NFL. They are not a juggernaut. They're a fun young team. That's it. They're not. They're stuck at like 16th or 17th in the draft forever now.
Great place to be.
It's the perfect place to be. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll jump right in.
Stack Attack.
Betz and I will be previewing the Saturday games first and then talking about the Sunday games. So after we break down the Saturday games, I think it's helpful for people just to say like, hey, here's the players I'll be overweight just on the Saturday slate. And then we'll talk about the Sunday slate. And then at the very end, we will give some slate breakers that I'm sure are going to hit. I need to go back. Somebody out there, okay? I do a lot of studies. My brain hurts sometimes. Some of them are not like worthwhile studies that I do. But can somebody out there go back and just find all of our slate breakers and see what the hit rate is? Somebody
has to. I mean, we're entering the offseason.
It's going to be me, isn't it?
You'll have time. You'll have time, Kyle.
Gosh, I have so many other things I want to look up and correlate with.
Well, this is important.
It is helpful. People are like, does this really matter? I would say we had a better year with slate breakers than in years past.
It depended on the week, but
based
in general,
on the vibes.
In general, there were some good ones for sure.
Yeah. I think our sponsors got like even worse because I forgot some weeks that we used to do that.
Used to? What do you mean used to?
Oh, yeah. We got one. A great one on today's show. All right. First game, we're going to talk about Los Angeles Chargers at the Houston Texans. The Chargers are 2.5-point road favorites, and the over-under's at 42.5. That's the lowest of the weekend. When I started analyzing this game, my biggest thing was just reorienting myself about who the Texans are and how bad they've been over the last 6 weeks. They're 27th in EPA per play. And even worse, they have had the fewest offensive plays per game over the last 6 weeks. They're just not sustaining drives. And we talked a lot over the last couple months that CJ Stroud, the difference between last year and this year is you're not seeing the huge plays. So his YPA is down a ton and he's just taking more sacks. So you're seeing a lot of these negative plays and drives that just aren't sustaining, and so you're not seeing crazy outputs on the offensive end. They've had a ton of guys hurt this year. So at the end of the day, I'm worried because this team just can't sustain drives, and we know that the Chargers, they would prefer to run the ball. They're 8th highest in second half rush rate. So in their head, it's what they want to do. They can set up the play action. I just think it's a bad matchup for the Texans and a team that is limping in.
For sure. I think, before we even get into like the nitty gritty here, just top level view of the team is, I mean, CJ Stroud has regressed in his own
so
right.
Sad.
The offensive line is the worst in the playoffs by a lot of people's metrics and standards. Stroud is seeing a ton of quick pressure, so you're not seeing, like you said, the play action deep stuff. Nico is obviously a stud, and I don't know how much Deontay Johnson's going to play. I think he played 20 snaps in week 18. Part of that was with the backups. How much does he ramp up here? I don't know, but if you don't have him in a full-time role yet, the weaponry is not good enough to put up elite fantasy days, let alone put up huge scoring outputs for your own offense. So just like top down, like it's really tough to sell it on Houston. And I think back to kind of how the offense is played, Bobby Slowick, I think, is going to try to establish Joe Mixon here and just hope that they can kind of keep this like a slugfest, keep it low scoring, and maybe, win by a field goal or something like that. Because yeah, man, there's not a lot of positive things to say about Stroud. He's really struggled against zone coverage. The Chargers play a ton of zone coverage. He struggled when he's been under pressure quickly. The Chargers can get after you without blitzing. So I'm lower on Stroud just in general on the 6-game slate. He won't make my player pool on the 2-game slate. I think all quarterbacks should make your pool just because weird stuff happens, but certainly I'm not excited about Stroud stacks in this game, looking at the Chargers and kind of how it matches up here. So yeah, like I said, I think it's a Mixon game plan. Whether or not that works, I'm not sure. The Chargers have been kind of up and down in run success all year. I will say they're number 2 in the league in terms of using light boxes. So like in theory, it should work for Mixon, but that doesn't mean he's an elite fantasy play. Like he could still get 18, 19 carries and give you 85 yards and no touchdown. So yeah, hard to say a lot of positive stuff about the Houston offense right now. I don't know if you have a different take there, but just generally, I'm not super high on the spot.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's really sad because we've been Stroud truthers for a long time. The ceiling just hasn't been there. I think we brought up the stat before, but only 2 games above 20 plus DK points this year. I wanted to put this number to the test, see if we're on the same page. Since he hasn't done this since week 5, what is the likelihood that CJ Stroud puts up 20 plus DK points this week? Because I have a number in my head. I want to see if you hit it.
So on a 6-game slate, this is the lowest total on the slate. And only a couple teams are projected for fewer points in the implied markets than Houston. All that said, I think it's a pretty low probability. 30%?
Yeah, I was at 20.
Maybe? I don't know.
It's just tough without anybody other than Nico to be able to be dependable. I mean, John Mechie, if you wanted a dart, it's John Mechie. He's getting the route participation that matters. But at the end of the day, like what the Chargers do is they play a ton of cover 4 and they basically say dink and dunk it. Like don't get beat over the top. And basically I need you to have Dalton Schultz beat you. And I think we would all say like, okay, that's a great game plan. If you're funneling targets that way, they don't really matter. I do think Joe Mixon is a really good large field leverage piece because he's so expensive that when you look at the Saturday slate, you go, oh, it's Derrick Henry. Okay, where else am I going to go to save salary? So like 7,200 on DK, 7,500 on FanDuel. I think he's a good play on FanDuel. You can play him there. And there is some metrics if you want to look there. I put him in pace of place of where their man gap concepts are actually a good matchup here for the Chargers. So I think Mixon is interesting. He's been super inefficient though. Like over the last month, he's been really bad. It hasn't really mattered at all. But I think the vibes are, okay, don't play Mixon, just figure out and pay up for Nico, where I think Mixon is a good leverage point.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I will say on Nico, the target share here should be absolutely ridiculous. I mean, like chips are down. Obviously, it's the playoffs, must-win game. They got nobody else kind of as far as a dependable option. And in that game in Week 18, we kind of were confused, like, what are the Texans going to do? They had nothing to play for. They were locked into the 4 seed no matter what for like 3 weeks in a row. But the offense have just been so broken. They needed like a drive or two with Stroud to just get it clicking. And you saw Nico get 5 targets on 8 of those routes. Again, that's an extremely small sample, but like I think he's going to look to Nico for his first, second, and third read and then figure it out from there. So, you know, Nico's going to make my player pool, obviously. He's just got a massive ceiling without Diggs, without Tank Dell. But just in general, I don't see a ton of touchdown upside for the Texans. So for me, even on the 2-game slate, I'll probably cap it to like max 2 Texans in my lineup, something like that, and go overweight elsewhere.
Yeah, the one area where you can have confidence in the Texans is their pass rush. So if you think, hey, you know, they get after Justin Herbert, they're number 1 in ESPN's pass rush win rate. I had to say that slow. Pass rush win rate. Pass rush win rate. That would be the area. But on the Chargers side, this offense in the second half has been more balanced. They've been really good on play action. And the stat that I brought up is that Ladd McConkey ranks only behind Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson in receiving yards on play action plays. So he's been awesome this year. I think he's a really, really good play this week. The Texans over the last 6 weeks, they've been pretty bad. 30th in fantasy points per dropback using 2-eye safety looks, 24th in EPA per pass attempt. I think it's a good spot for Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I think it's a good spot in general for the Chargers offense, and specifically if they can get the run game going here a little bit, which obviously, I mean, they'll have Zeke, so they will be able to here. No, in all seriousness, with Dobbins there and him getting a full workload, since week 12, Houston ranks 30th in rush success rate allowed, 23rd in stuff rate. They're 26th in explosive rush rate allowed. So Houston on the year has been very good in run defense. They've struggled recently. So if the Chargers can get that going, then you can hit, you know, the deeper targets to Quentin Johnston, Ladd on the crossers in the middle of the field, stuff like that off play action. I think, like you said, Herbert can have a very efficient day. Just for context, Houston has faced the second highest deep throw rate in the NFL, and there aren't many quarterbacks in the league that are better at the deep ball than Justin Herbert. So I do like betting on an efficiency performance here from Herbert and the Chargers offense. Obviously, they're on the road, a little bit of a tougher spot. The question is just, can the offensive line hold up to the pass rush? And if they can, I think Herbert can succeed. So yeah, I like Dobbins. I like Herbert, and I like Herbert stacks just because when you look at the wide receiver depth chart, you know, Josh Palmer's probably missing this game. And so last week they slid into the wide receiver 3 spot, DJ Chark, who really can't earn targets whatsoever. So you could see the target share just be super condensed to Ladd and Quentin Johnston, who randomly saw 14 targets last week, had an unreal career day. Obviously, we shouldn't expect that again. But Quentin Johnston did lead the team last week with 84% route participation. So yeah, I like Herbert to Ladd and QJ. I think an onslaught here is fine too if you wanted to include Dobbins in that, but definitely a little bit higher on the Chargers offense here instead of the Texans.
One of the things I noticed doing a deep dive is that we joke about Bobby Slowick sometimes just like, okay, we're just going to run the ball with Joe Mixon. We know that Greg Roman can do that sometimes, and so I think J.K. Dobbins is a good play, but these teams are 32nd, that's the Chargers, and 31st Texans in terms of stuff rate. So 50% of their runs this year are stuffed the line of scrimmage. For both these teams, they become kind of predictable, which is super frustrating because you have a cannon with Herbert, and we saw how good Stroud was last year. So there is routes where these run games are just bad and inefficient, both of them, and you don't need either player. Like, you don't have to be like, oh, I'm going to stack up the Chargers side and play Mixon, or I'm going to stack up Stroud and play Dobbins. It's possible that neither one of these are that great, but any ancillary pieces on the Chargers side that you are somewhat stoked about?
Stoked? No. Viable, and like hope that it's like 4 catches and maybe one of them is a touchdown. I do think Big Montana, Will Dissly, is fine at 3,400 on DraftKings. He did return from injury 2 weeks ago, and we saw his route participation kind of slowly start at 40%. This past week, it was up to 65%. So you could do worse on a 2-game slate. Relatively speaking, I obviously prefer like Mark Andrews, who we'll talk about. I think Isaiah Likely is a better play, but if you're looking for just like a different, punt play to save salary, I do think Dissly, especially as part of Herbert stacks, is fine.
Okay. What's your Vegas take here?
Man, I feel like everybody in the world is on the Chargers here, but I am too. I'm taking the Chargers minus 2.5.
Yeah, if it was at 3.5, I think I'd have a different story. But yeah, I'm going to take the Chargers, which I've done nonstop. And this team always comes through when you need them most.
They are so dependable.
Did you see Andy pick them to go to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, that was wild.
We don't really argue with Andy at this point because he sometimes knows things that he's not supposed to know about the future. So cool. I would love that. I would love that so much. Yeah.
Very fun.
All right. Second game on Saturday is the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore's 9.5-point home favorite. The over-under is 43.5, and the Steelers have the lowest team implied total on the slate at 17 points.
17 points. They've got the worst odds to win the Super Bowl of any team in the playoffs. People laughed at me when I took the under 8.5 and they came out on fire, in the season. This is the team I was betting against, is this version. So it's been bad, man. And now you get a divisional opponent that knows your offense through and through. And the Baltimore defense has been unreal. Since they moved Kyle Hamilton out of the role he had to start the year, where he was kind of down close to the line of scrimmage in like a hybrid nickel linebacker type role, they put him back at traditional safety. Lights out. Number 1 in EPA per play. Number 1 in success rate. Number 1 in points per game allowed. They've just been dominant. So this is one of those slates again where it's like, man, I don't want to mess around with the Steelers here. Like, yeah, you can give me a one-off piece and I get that, but I don't know if I'm going to play any Russ this week, quite frankly. It's just hard when like Pickens, if you take Pickens out of the game, which I think the Ravens can do, you just cannot win games when you're relying on this version of Mike Evans, Van Jefferson. It's just, you can't. So I think the Steelers here are a pretty easy fade candidate, and just hope that you're right on a small slate, that they're not the team you need. Again, 17 implied points in the playoffs. Like, come on. So what are your thoughts on the Steelers?
I just think it's hilarious that they got to their win total and then like, that's all we needed to do. We just stick it to bets and then we're done. We are literally like, the interviews and everything else have kind of felt like this team's like just done. I saw some Russ social media that came out where he was just like, all right, I'm ready for the offseason from his text with people. I mean, they're not built to win on the road in the playoffs unless Lamar has an implosion of 2 or 3 turnovers. It's just not going to happen.
The only way they win this game is if it stays like below 40. Like if this turns into a back and forth and Russ has to drop back, dear Lord. Yeah, that's the only way I see it. So the way you could poke holes in this game is you say Arthur Smith relentlessly feeds Najee and Warren and just they try to play good defense and keep it low scoring. Like that's their only hope, in my opinion. So I do think that for large field type stuff, that range of outcomes exists, and I'm willing to acknowledge that. But across, if you're playing a 20 max or 150, like definitely underweight Steelers, I think is my stance this week.
Yeah, so these two teams played each other twice this year, week 11 and week 16. The Ravens averaged 172 rushing yards per game in those games. And on the season, they averaged 182. So no big deal, just averaged the most yards per carry of any team over the last 75 years. I looked this up. That's their explosive rush rate in those two games against the Steelers, 19%. There just were
very good.
Wildly awesome big plays. And so part of my analysis, if you're just playing the Saturday slate, is it feels like you have to have Lamar or Henry in every single lineup, but I'm kind of getting to the point where it's like you kind of might need both of them. And I know you're paying up a ton. It's 32% of your salary if you are investing in both of those guys, but it's just a really good matchup for them. And if you look at what they need to do at their price point, they've averaged 48 points per game, DK points per game together. And so if you got 50 points from these two players, that's a massive total from two players. And I know you're expending a lot of your salary, but I just think if you know they're going to win, or if at least you're banking on that, these are the two dudes. Like if Zay Flowers is out, then these are the two guys the offense runs through.
For sure. And on a big slate, we almost would never play these guys together. But like you're saying, like if the Texans only put up 17, the Steelers put up 14, the Chargers put up, 21 or something, and the Ravens happen to put up 30, it's like, well, Lamar and Henry are probably accounting for almost all of those touchdowns, right? So like that's what you're saying. So yeah, I love that bet this week. I'm with you. Obviously, you don't need us to tell you Lamar's a great play. Henry in wins this year, 21 rush attempts, 131 yards, and averaging a rushing touchdown per game. And in the two matchups against Pittsburgh, like you said, some of those explosive plays did happen. He's averaged 5 and 6.8 yards per carry in these two matchups. So even though the Steelers are a good defense, this run game is just so dynamic with Lamar and Henry that I think they're still going to have success. It is worth noting Cam Hayward, stud defensive lineman, still doing it at his age, was a DNP both days to start practice this week with an illness. I fully expect him to play, but just maybe he can't play a full snap share. Maybe he's not 100%. Obviously, that would work in favor of Henry and the rushing attack here. So, yeah, I like that take a lot with you on Lamar and Henry together in DFS this week.
Cam Hayward, Georgia boy here, Peachtree Ridge High School.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, his dad was around here. The Steelers, they run a lot of single high looks. Lamar's killing it there. But what I wanted to bring up is Mark Andrews over the last 6 weeks has kind of quietly become the Mark Andrews that we love. And in terms of target share, we always know the touchdown is on the board when they get in close, but he's actually been ahead of Zay Flowers in a couple of metrics, yards per out run, and then his targets per out run has been at 25% over the last 6 weeks. So think of Mark Andrews, think of what his price is and what it is on a normal slate. And at 4,700, I think that's a really good tag on DK to stack up with Lamar. I mean, I was looking at the playoffs in general. There's not great tight ends. I mean, Kelsey and Laporta are not on the slate because they're on a bye, but all the best tight ends we play, Bowers, McBride, Kittle, Jonnu Smith, none of them are in the playoffs. So the tight end position is a little bit different context-wise than what we usually think, but I think Andrews is a really, really great play. Anybody else that you want to talk about on the Ravens side?
Yeah, I think a big decision point is how to handle Rashad Bateman on this slate, because obviously without Zay Flowers, who's vacating a 25% target share, there's opportunity to go around. And when you look at the guys that are going to step in and run routes here, I mean, Nelson Aguilar was healthy and active last week. I'm not sure what's going on there, but like Aguilar obviously is not a target earner. Tylan Wallace is not earning targets. So in theory, it should go to Bateman, but he's kind of struggled in this matchup. And I don't know how much stock we should put into that with Joy Porter Jr. We usually say cornerback wide receiver stuff is not that important, but it is a factor to consider. So I think Bateman, where he's at, $5K on DraftKings, $6K on FanDuel, is a totally fine play. I will probably be a little underweight. And my way to attack this is to say, if you play Lamar with Henry, you say the Ravens have a very good day on the ground. We love Mark Andrews. I think he's a really good play. The Steelers have given up the second most tight end receptions in the league this year. What if you just play Andrews and Likely together and they just run a ton of 12 and that's how they attack this defense? And I think that's potentially likely without Zay Flowers. So I like Isaiah Likely, 3,200, super, super cheap. I like Andrews, obviously, and I think playing them together, a lot of the field is going to say, I'll just pick one or the other and not play them together. But on a 2-game slate, if the Ravens are the offense you need, I think it's very viable.
I think you do have to pay attention to what their wide receiver rotation looks like with Zay out. And then is Nelson Aguilar even playing? I was shocked that he was inactive last week because he passed concussion protocol and then he didn't play. Tylan Wallace, who had that one random game, was that a Thursday night where he just popped up out of nowhere?
That happens on showdown slates, man. You turn on the TV, you're watching, you're like, oh, Didn't know that guy was on this team. I have 0 of him. This is good.
Yes, yeah. No, I think that one of these players, Wallace is 3,100, Aguilar 3,400, could end up in the optimal if you're just playing on the Saturday only slate. You're trying to find a cheap wide receiver, and we know that Lamar has a ton of upside just in terms of throwing touchdowns. So I think we really like the Ravens side. I think if you wanted to onslaught the Ravens and play Lamar, Henry, Andrews, and even the Baltimore defense, like you could just throw it on. I'm looking at the Steelers, and I was talking about the film earlier. Russ is just so weird. For years, he's always had the deep ball. That was what was so beautiful in Seattle, and we've seen those moonshots work every once in a while with George Pickens. But Russ is one of the weirdest quarterbacks because he either chucks it deep or he checks it down. He's either a chuck or check guy. And when you do that, I know, you end up just negating the entire middle of the field in the intermediate area. And Russ had the fewest percentage of attempts in the intermediate area of the field, 11 to 19 yards in the NFL. And yet he had the second highest passer rating in the NFL, only behind Lamar here. It's like Arthur Smith just said, I don't really care about that area. And it just hasn't worked. So it's hard finding ancillary wide receivers that you can just say they're going to pepper them. That's just not the way the offense works. So if this game doesn't shoot out and let's say they keep it close, then I think the running backs are the best options.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that it's interesting. I mean, the matchup is brutal as far as the actual rushing matchup here against a Ravens defense that, has been pretty much dominant all year against the run, but really recently they are third in rush success rate, 15 yards per carry allowed since week 12. So over the final third, they've been very good. And when I look at Najee and I look at Jaylen Warren, it's super interesting because, previously for most of the season, it was like, okay, when they're both healthy, Najee's our early down back. If we're getting behind and we're trailing, it's going to be Jaylen Warren. And you saw that on Christmas in that Chiefs game. But last week, Najee Harris ran more routes than Jaylen Warren, and they were kind of in a back and forth behind most of the game and having to come from behind against the Bengals. So I don't really know what to expect here as far as the projection on the workload for the Steelers. Gut feel, I think Warren probably gets more into this game if it does get out of hand. If it's 10 points, 14 points in the second half, I think you'll see a lot of Jaylen Warren in that spot. So I don't mind Warren more as like hey, you could get some checkdowns, and if he gets you, 10 to 12 DK points, like that might be enough, right, on a 2-game slate. So I do think Warren is going to make my player pool. I'm not sure on Najee yet. It's really tough, like I said, just with him having to get there with an efficient day running the ball in a very, very difficult matchup as a double-digit road underdog. So not a great spot for Najee, obviously.
Yeah, I'll have some Warren. Pickens is so hard, man. You watch some Pickens films and you're like, I see it, and then you also see some absolute duds. So when you look at the wide receivers that are available on this slate, it's not a lot of guys you can click through. You can't just all of a sudden be like, I'm just not going to play him. It's like Nico on this Saturday. It's Nico, Ladd, Pickens. We don't have Flowers. And the next one is Bateman or Cuge at the 5K range. So what's your stance on Pickens? What would you do there?
Yeah, I think it's tough because you're relying on the deep ball to get there. I mean, he's had 5 or fewer catches in 8 of his last 9 games to close the season. So, on a full PPR site, if you're playing DraftKings, that's a guy that I'm going to say, beat me. You're going to have to catch one of these long balls. This is one of the best defenses in the league. I'm going to bet against that and probably come in underweight for sure, especially considering the touchdown expectation is so minimal here too for this offense. So yeah, Pickens is tough, 6,300, 6,900 on FanDuel for a guy that's not necessarily a lock to see volume, even though he has no target competition, is so confusing, and the usage is just not good. So yeah, I'm underweight George Pickens.
Okay. Yeah, I want to play him. I want to figure out a way where it works, and maybe on FanDuel that's more of his game and what you want to do. The Muth has struggled this year against the Ravens, so I think at the end of the day, I see the vibes though. And I know in a tournament play, there's reasons to be able to use these guys as leverage. And Calvin Austin is always one of those players that you can kind of shoot darts for, but at the end of the day, they usually come up empty, most of the time. So give me your Vegas take.
I'll take the under in this game. Under 43.5.
Okay. I see that logic. It's so low though, man.
I know.
The Ravens could put up 30 themselves, And then you're like, okay, can the Steelers get to 14 points, 17 points, something like that?
I just think divisional matchup, third time facing these teams, know each other so well. The Steelers are going to play slow, try to run it on 1st and 10 to set up 2nd and 6, and then 3rd and manageable. Okay, cool. We picked up a first down. All right, let's punt. The clock's ticking. Like that's how I see it going here. So I'll take the under.
Yeah, I see where you're going there. I'm going to say, can the Steelers get to 17 points? Like, I wouldn't mind taking their under of their team implied total.
Makes sense.
Okay. Let's go to the Sunday games. Talk about the Denver Broncos at the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are 8.5-point home favorites, and the over-under is at 46.5. The Bills at home this year, they're averaging 34 points per game, and you can even add in week 18 where they didn't play their starters, but they've been awesome at home this year. They're undefeated there. They're second in EPA per play. Josh Allen's completion percentage jumps from 54% on the road to 68% at home. So Bills Mafia, they're there, they're alive. It's a good thing. And this team is different than the Josh Allen teams we looked at in the playoffs the last couple of years. They're running the ball with success, and it almost doesn't matter who's running the ball. Is it Ty Johnson? Is it Ray Davis? Is it James Cook or Josh Allen? Like, they've all been good. So I think it's easy to have confidence in the Bills at home.
For sure. Yeah. 27.5 implied team total here is the highest on the entire wildcard slate. Obviously the highest on the Sunday 3-game slate. So I think you want some Bills in your lineup. You might say, well, it's a difficult matchup against Denver. And that is true. Denver's defense has been very good this year. But in recent weeks, they kind of got crushed, by some not so incredible quarterbacks. Give up 32 points to Jameis Winston, 27 to the Chargers and Herbert, 30 to Justin Herbert and the Bengals, in 3 other 4 games prior to facing Carson Wentz in week 18. So I don't want to overreact to week 18 where they played the Chiefs backups, but Denver did look very good in that game. And obviously they're kind of a fun group to root for. I just want to bet on the Bills offense here though, and kind of fade that defensive matchup, because one area that I think the Bills can have success, specifically Josh Allen, is Denver does blitz at a pretty high rate. They're 4th in blitz rate, but they generate pressure at the 9th lowest rate when they do that. So in other words, they're not very good at blitzing and actually capitalizing on that opportunity. Josh Allen against the blitz this year has thrown for the 2nd most passing touchdowns. So whether it's getting out of the pocket away from pressure and scrambling, whether it's picking apart a blitz-heavy defense for a touchdown, we know he's willing to run more in the playoffs. 56.3 rushing yards per game in his career in the postseason. Just feels like an awesome spot to bet on Josh Allen here at home. Fade the matchup and go overweight on a guy that can give you 30. In the best case scenario, 35 DK points. That's not in the range of outcomes on a lot of quarterbacks on this slate. So I think betting on that makes a lot of sense for tournaments.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't want to pay up for the price tag, and I totally get it. You can find a combination somewhere else. But Josh Allen is not human. And in the game we play, he has been a cheat code for years. We talk about Josh Allen all the time. He's also different. Like, I was looking at these two quarterbacks, and a stat that we bring up a ton is about first read targets and first read target shares for wide receiver. We often don't talk about it with quarterbacks because, we're just focusing on what's the volume. But these quarterbacks are 2 of the lowest in terms of percentage of targets to first read. Josh Allen is by far the lowest in the NFL at just 56.7%. And Nick's is actually pretty low at 61%. And what that means is it's not just the scrambling ability and outside the pocket. It also opens up opportunities for 2nd and 3rd reads on the play. So when I mentioned Matt Collins, somebody might be laughing out there, but that's what happens in the playoffs is random dudes like that who are on the field a ton and have opportunities end up getting these, touchdowns or these long plays because of Josh Allen's ability to scramble and get outside the pocket. So I like stacking up Josh Allen and just throwing darts. If you wanted to be overweight Josh Allen and just say that's my stance, I'm going to go there, and you're in a 3 max or a 20 max, just figure out all the different combinations that are possible. And you can say, I'm going to stack up Josh Allen with Amari Cooper. I'm going to do it with Keon Coleman. I'm going to do it with Khalil Shakir, and just find out all these different skinny stack combinations where you are looking at Josh Allen as the big difference maker on this slate.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense to me. In particular, Khalil Shakir, you kind of have to pick your spots with him. And when I look at kind of how Denver operates defensively and how he operates, Denver has not really faced a lot of deep pass attempts this year, they've actually faced one of the lowest in the league. And Khalil Shakir, when you think about a lot of his targets, they're close to the line of scrimmage, quick hitters, screens, stuff like that. And specifically against the blitz, which, as I mentioned, Denver does blitz a lot. Khalil Shakir leads the team with a 28% target share when Josh Allen is blitzed. So I like that take on being overweight Josh Allen, specifically with Khalil Shakir in this game. But the interesting angle to me is James Cook. Because like projections, he never really like projects as one of the best plays in the slate. Like, you know, it's just hard because Allen accounts for so many rushing touchdowns. But James Cook's coming off a season where he ran for 16 rushing touchdowns, 15, whatever it was. Like, the dude is involved around the goal line. And if you are taking a similar approach to Buffalo that you might take on the Saturday 2-game slate with the Ravens, like, just bet on the Bills being the offense you need. I also don't mind playing James Cook either as a one-off from this game or with Josh Allen. I think is viable too. So yeah, James Cook sub 7K on DraftKings. That seems like a nice price tag to go after this week.
Yeah, both of these defenses, the way that they play is they want to limit the big plays. And remember when we had those wild Buffalo games, it was the Rams and the Lions, the way that we talked about it is, you know, you beat them by just a ton of different throws underneath. And so, like, I think the Broncos are going to have to approach things the same way. They're not going to be able to get these big hitters. You know, you might be wanting to chase those Marvin Mims plays, but at the end of the day, the Bills defense saw the fewest 20-plus air yard attempts in the NFL because that's not how you beat them. They play a lot of too high safety looks, and I need to tell people just to temper their expectations because Courtland Sutton has been terrible against too high looks this year. So really, I think the Broncos' success kind of comes down to, can they run the ball? And I was asking you that question, and your answer was like, I don't think they've done it the whole year.
They really haven't, man. And like, it's so weird. The usage, I never really put a ton of stock into what just happened the week before because Sean Payton will flip it on a dime and change the playing time. But last week, Jaleel McLaughlin saw 16 carries. Like that's crazy. And then you say, okay, if he's going to get that, but he's also getting a lot of the pass down work, like Jaleel might be a great play. And the Bills do give up a lot of running back receptions. So I'm not saying he's a bad play. But last week, it was Javonte that led the room in running back targets. So, like, they all have these, like, different roles, and then Estime is kind of just the grinder who, I mean, we did hit the touchdown last week.
Yeah, we did.
Which was very nice. But 7 of his 12 carries came on the very last drive against the Chiefs junior varsity
That's all
team.
you need. All you need.
So, now on the road as 8.5-point underdogs, you know, unless one of the other guys gets injured, I don't think you'll see a ton of Estime in this game. So, I'm not going to play a ton of him. Jaleel's fine because he's so cheap, and then Javonte, man, it's really hard to trust. So, yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think Bo Nix has to win this game or at least keep it close for Denver to be in it. And the way he does it is with quick hitters. I think he has to use his legs a lot in this game, so I don't even mind playing a Nix skinny on this slate. The problem is, like you said, Sutton's not in a very good spot, and with Mims, I mean, he's priced up a little, 5,100. 96% of his yards this year have come after the catch. That is insane. So, in theory, he could break off a long one again. I mean, he's super explosive, but he's also not even running half the routes. Like, you know, he's not on the field that much. So, it's a long-winded way of saying I don't know how to attack it, but I think the way that the Broncos can keep up with Josh Allen and the Bills is the pass game, the quick hitters, get the ball out quickly, and Nix rushing is specifically what I'm targeting. So, I do have interest in Nix. But man, it's tough to be in on Sutton and Mims given, you know, how their roles have operated and how unlikely it is that Mims keeps us up.
Yeah, Vele is kind of interesting at 4,100 from just a pure, like, he's down there, he's easy to forget, and Mims is clearly the flashier name. So he's going to show up actually kind of okay if you're sorting by targets and what they're looking like at their salary. But yeah, Nix is my favorite play, and I probably won't end up having a ton of him because there's just other quarterbacks on this slate. Specifically this afternoon or this Sunday slate, it's like Jaden Daniels, Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen that I just feel way more comfortable with. So I wrote up some stuff for them, but I just think at the end of the day, it's kind of clear this is Buffalo on the road for a rookie quarterback. It's a tough place to play. So I don't mind 8.5 actually with the Bills.
Yeah, it's tough. The line, I feel like it has not moved, but I think a lot of people are on the Bills this week, which always makes me a little uneasy. I'm just going to take Buffalo's team total here over 27.5.
Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, next game. I hate we're going to be quick about this, but it's just the way it is, man. Green Bay at Philadelphia. The over-under's at 45.5. The Eagles are 4.5-point favorites. And this game is gross. I hate telling you this, for DFS purposes, this is not the same game we saw in week 1 that was in Brazil, where neither defense could tackle. The field was terrible. This is a different, matchup. And every single thing in my pace metrics are this game is slow. These teams want to play slow, a neutral rush rate, neutral pace, everything else. It's just not a lot to like here. And then Green Bay's kind of coming in kind of banged up. For sure.
Yeah. If ever there was a spot for the Packers to let Jordan Love go, it was that game against the Vikings a couple weeks ago. And Matt LaFleur said, no, we're going to run Josh Jacobs in a negative game script. And that's what we do. And I think you're going to see the same thing considering the state of the team, right? Jordan Love banged up with I think he'll be fine, but minor elbow injury. No Christian Watson, which, he's kind of frustrating in fantasy, but he has a role in the team to at least stretch the defense. I think he's going to be incentivized to give the ball to Josh Jacobs. That's how I think they're going to play this game. So you have two offenses, and then obviously on the Eagles side, we know they want to run the ball. Two offenses that want to run and play slow and really sustain drives is kind of how they like to operate. If both offenses can do that, the clock is just going to be ticking nonstop. And this one, I think, definitely has a path to the under. So I'm with you in general, lower on this game from a game stack standpoint. Doesn't mean there aren't good plays here. It's just that I don't think I'll be getting into a full, stack up one side, bring it back on the other type of situation. This is one of the games I'll definitely be lower than market.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of expensive plays too. So when you look at the Eagles side, it's okay, if you want to stack up Hurts and Brown, you're probably not playing Saquon with that too. And you're basically saying this game needs to go off. And that's just a lot to ask at this price point. Since that week 1 game, the defense have been very different. So I kind of throw out that from the data set. Philadelphia has allowed the lowest explosive pass play rate. So when I look at the Eagles, or I look at the Packers side, I'm like, Jordan Love has to be crazy efficient, have these big plays down the field. And we've kind of seen less and less in that over the last 3 or 4 weeks. So I don't have a ton of interest. If you wanted to play Saquon and then pick a wide receiver and you're picking the, one that hits, is it Wicks or whoever, I get that. I've shared the last couple weeks that Jaden Reed and I are not on good talking terms. So don't know if I will be playing him out of pure spite. But if you did think that the Packers grab a lead, then it's Josh Jacobs, and he becomes a really good leverage piece over Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I think from a game theory standpoint, that does make a lot of sense. From a football guy standpoint, the Eagles, even against the Ravens, remember a month ago before Christmas, nobody runs on the Ravens. They just were running all over them. So the offensive line, I think, is going to have success here. Saquon, I think, is going to have success here. I think the Eagles will control the clock, keep it moving here, and put up points with sustained drives. So I like the Eagles side of this more than I do on the Packers side, given the health and state of the team. I will say some of the pass catchers are cheap. Devonta Smith, for a small slate at only 5,700, is a very good tag for a guy that we know has a pretty good ceiling here. So I don't mind him. Dallas Goedert came back in the lineup last week. He's only 3,900. That's not a bad tag, especially in a good matchup against a Packers team that gave up a ton of production to tight ends. So I think those two are my second favorite plays on Philly behind Saquon. But in general, like I said, lower on this game compared to the rest.
Over the last 6 weeks, Green Bay is 31st in EPA per rush attempt allowed. So it's a good boost for Saquon. I was looking at the Green Bay wide receivers, just so flat across the board. In terms of route participation, and even when you look at first read targets and the way that they distribute things in offense, you need crazy efficient plays. And Christian Watson actually did those for them when he was on the field, but the guy's never on the field anymore. So I don't really have a take on a Green Bay player. I think Tucker Kraft is kind of interesting as just a random dart because their tight ends are so bad on the slate. But yeah, so give me your Vegas take. That's super unbiased.
No bias whatsoever. Fly Eagles fly, -4.5.
Yeah, Eagles at home. I think this is a Jordan Love train wreck game waiting to happen.
Uh-oh.
Which means play him in a GPP. That's what it means.
Exactly.
He backdoors his way. All right, last game we're going to talk about. It's Washington at Tampa Bay. This game has the highest total of the weekend at 50.5. Tampa Bay is 3.5 favorites. And when you look at the pace, the way these two teams play, This is really, really fun. Commanders are 4th in neutral pace, number 1 in no huddle rate, and Tampa Bay games have averaged the 3rd most combined plays per game. So we like these teams, and I like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because their pass defense is so bad. So if you can throw on them, then you kind of have this back and forth affair, and there's lots of different ways to attack this. The Commanders' defense, it is the worst rushing defense still in the playoffs, which if you go through and you look at a lot of the teams that are in the playoffs, they're good against the run. Like, you just can't do it that well. Washington is pretty bad, and so it sets up Bucky Irving to once again do his thing, go off, be the dude, and he's cheaper than what he was last week. Like, explain that to me, because a lot of the players on this slate are cheaper than what we usually get. Jalen Hurts, we just talked about him. It's the cheapest he's been in weeks and weeks. Bucky Irving last week, was he $7,700?
Correct.
So, I mean, it's a $700 discount. He's in the playoffs, and he's in a really, really good matchup. So anyway, he's a great play.
Yeah, I think these sites just kind of want you to be able to play the fun plays and not have to worry about, playing the wide receiver 4 or something on one of these teams.
Jamming in Jaleel McLaughlin.
Jahan Dotson. Yeah, that wouldn't be great. Yeah, I mean, he's a great play. And I think if you're playing cash games, either on the 6-game slate or the 3-game slate, Bucky to me is the first guy in. I mean, I've been talking about this a lot recently down the stretch. Like, when teams have must-win games, I think the phrase I always use is like, when the chips are down, like, where are they going? Bucky touched the ball 21 times last week. Rachaad White, 0 touches. He'll play a handful of snaps, but Bucky Irving, 48 snaps to Rachaad White's 18. Again, 21 touches to 0. Bucky's an awesome play and a great matchup. It's the highest total on the slate. He's at home. He's explosive. Nothing negative to say. So yeah, I think Bucky's in a phenomenal play, whether it's in tournaments or in cash games. I just think he's so likely to give you points in this spot.
Yeah, and it's easy to buy into the Buccaneers when you look at their team implied total, which is about 27. You think of Baker and where he's at price-wise, it's not expensive enough. He's only 6.8 on DK. And then Mike Evans is expensive. He's the wide receiver 1 in salary. But since he's returned, week 12 is when it was, he's just been a monster, man. He's leading the entire NFL in receiving yards, being targeted on 33% of his routes. And then I looked at how the Commanders have been playing defense over last month. Remember, they had that week 14 bye very late in the season. It's really good to see a team that's been playing for that long, they get a rest, and then over the final month of the season, like, how do they adjust? They've actually increased their man coverage, and Mike Evans is one of those players over the years. Against man coverage, he's just been amazing. 4.09 yards per out run against man since he's returned. So he's a beast. You should play him this week. I think the bigger question is where...
Aren't you worried about Marshawn Lattimore, Kyle?
I sometimes forget that he's even on this team.
I think it's funny. I'm obviously saying it. People can tell by my tone that I'm not worried about it. But I think people will use that in their analysis this week and be like, historically against Lattimore's barely played this year because he's been so injured. Like, he's coming off a hamstring injury again. So if people are worried about that, I'm not. I think Mike Evans is an awesome play.
You don't think we should use splits from a different team from 7 years ago?
I mean, I do hope that there's, a little bit of back and forth between them because it's always fun to watch, but I think Evans wins this one.
Yeah, it could play out that way in the real NFL. We don't care at all in DFS. We just don't care. And we rarely ever talk about cornerback matchups because it doesn't really matter. So McMillan's tough. When you score 7 touchdowns in 5 games, you get a lot of attention. He's leading this team in routes over the last, 5 games. So he's been the dude. I just always bet against that. And if people are thinking that's going to repeat, like, he seems like a player, if the field's really on McMillan and I have to wait for roster percentage, then I'll probably come in underweight.
Agreed. Yeah. Like, eventually the efficiency will regress to something normal. Like you said, just touchdown rate here is pretty unreal. He's also, over the last month, caught 20 of 24 targets, which for a wide receiver just doesn't happen. 83% catch rate in the last month is not sustainable. The touchdown rate is not sustainable. So you could just say, like, I'll bet that, Kyle spreadsheets here and the math will work out and I'll come in underweight. That's probably the approach I will take, especially if Cade Otton comes back, which, not that Cade is like, well, I got to be careful who I say this to. Cade is a superstar. Cade is a superstar. But what I was going to say is, when he's at least competent as a pass catcher, which no disrespect to Payne Durham or Big Culps, Devin Culp. I just think the target competition, could be a little bit tougher for McMillan in this game, is what I will say if K-Dotton is back. But yeah, I'm with you. I think in general, you just bet against the insane efficiency that he's had over the last month.
It's like you were looking this man in the face.
I was scared.
You were like trying to say something mean, but you said it in such a nice way that really it even came out worse.
I know. I should have just said what I wanted to say.
What do you really want to say? Just tell me right now.
K-Dotton is the best tight end in the league. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, you probably can't play him. All of his numbers, whatever target numbers you're using, just look in the last since Evans' return, and they've been doo-doo.
That 3-game stretch, though, Kyle, we'll always have that.
When he was in the Hall of Fame?
When he was averaging like 12 targets a game.
I remember having those conversations with Andy because he was this tight end on his redraft team, and I was just like, Andy, let me tell you, this guy's really fun, but he is a Mr. Necessary. And what happens with these guys is they fade back into being route running dudes. I'm not going to really search there. Any thoughts on Rachaad White? Because he kind of is who we thought he would be.
He didn't touch the ball once last week, so I don't know how you play him. I mean, to score fantasy points, Kyle, you have to be on the field and either getting a rush attempt or catching the football, which he did as much as you last week. So, it's tough.
He put forth more effort than me to do less.
True that.
Yeah, this was before the season. We talked this out. He was one of our bigger fades. All right, going to the Washington side. There are a couple of plays. I wish I could just play Jaden Daniels in super flex spot because he's awesome. The Buccaneers run the highest rate of zone coverage in the NFL. They use cover 2 50% of the time. You'd think it would be really easy to go, okay, how has Jaden Daniels been against zone? And just go there because he's been really good. And then how has he been against cover 2? The problem is nobody's played cover 2 against Jaden Daniels this year. They've seen the lowest rate of cover 2 in the NFL, and that's what the Buccaneers have done. So I do think it's kind of a trickier matchup than you think using pass analysis. I think that it's easy to look at Terry McLaurin as the obvious stacking partner because they've been so good and over-the-top efficient together. I am a little worried, though, in this matchup on the road. I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm going to be taking the Bucs in this game.
See, I think that's probably right, but in my head, I'm like, there's always one upset, right, in wild card round. And so far, we've picked the Chargers, who are favored, the Ravens, who are favored, the Eagles, who are favored. You were on the Bills. If there's a game that can be an upset, to me, and any team can win any week, but like to me, I think I almost said the Ravens. The Commanders are live here because of the injuries in the Bucs secondary. I mean, they had to go down to the wire with Spencer Rattler last week. Are you kidding me? So, I mean, Jaden is special. There's just something about this team, man. It's hard to put your finger on it, but yeah, 3 points I think is a very fair line. I do think they can keep it to that field goal and even potentially get up the upset here. So I don't know. Go Commanders, I guess.
That's because my upset would be the Rams on Monday night.
Yeah, but it's like a 1 point spread.
Whoa, buddy. That's not where it started. That's not where I put my money.
Moving the lines.
Oh man, that thing went from 1.5 to 1.
Just moving markets, man. That's what you do.
Yeah, and it wasn't like I put 5,000. I put I put $5 here, and then I just kept doing that 1,000 times.
All the units.
Yeah, I just worry a little bit, man. Like I don't love the matchup for the running game.
Running game matchup is brutal.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see Eckler in this one, so it makes it really hard to click the button for either dude. I did want to give you some hot thoughts about Olamide Zaccheaus.
Oh, Olamide, is he the key to the slate?
What if I told you that over the last month, which is what we care about, right? Like, are you cooking right now? Are you ready after the bye? They went in the bye week 14 and Cliff said, I got a guy who's going to command targets. Okay? So here's some numbers for you, Betz. And you just hold on to this and you think about it for a while. Olamide Zaccheaus, since the bye over last month, he's leading the team in targets per out run against zone, yards per out run against zone, fantasy points per route run against zone, and first read target share against zone coverage.
That sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, I mean, the Buccaneers run zone at the highest rate in the NFL. It's a simple math equation, and it comes out to saying I like Olamide Zaccheaus, which is not something I thought I would be saying in the playoffs.
So funny, man. Like, late in the year, obviously we're in the playoffs. You're like, let's fade the rookie who's really had a great stretch here down the stretch in McMillan. Let's play the dude who's been irrelevant for years in this slate. Like, that's what you got to do. I'm with you mostly because I want to bet on Jaden here. Like, I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball at all. Like,
it's not a bet on Zaccheaus. It's Jaden.
Yeah, it's the guys catching the ball from Jaden. Brian Robinson, 3.2 yards per carry over the last month, has been a plotter. The Bucs number 1 in EPA against the run, 5th in success rate since week 11. I think it's going to be really tough for them to run. You look at the defensive injuries in the defensive backfield for the Bucs. It's like, let's just bet on Jaden Daniels being Superman in this game. That's the only way they win it, in my opinion, is with Jaden Daniels having an incredible game. So if you think that that's the path, which that's how I'm playing it, then yeah, you should have interest in Terry, Zaccheaus for sure, and then Zach Ertz should make your player pool too. But I'm with you. I think the pass game here for Washington makes sense.
Yeah, and I love how you just threw in Ertz there, because normally you'd be like, you can play Zach Ertz if you want. If you're just playing these Sunday slate only, Zach Ertz is the tight end 1
in pricing.
Like, yes,
let's go Zach, baby.
It's Ertz, Otten, Kincaid, Goddard, Kraft. It's bad, man. Troutman.
They're all punt plays.
Yeah, you can pretty much punt with anybody if you want. They're not going to project great. I would throw out the Cade Otten stuff, and then Goddard and Kraft are in a gross game environment. Like, I think Ertz really is the best points per dollar tight end if you're just playing Sunday. And then I think Andrews is a better play than him.
Agreed. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right. So give me your Vegas take.
I'm going to take the Commanders here, plus the points.
Now I'm going to take the Buccaneers.
Head to head.
I'm just taking square favorites.
All favorites. What can go wrong?
All right. Any quick final thoughts about roster construction, thinking about Saturday and Sunday and which plays you'll be overweight or underweight on?
Yeah, I think the biggest stances that I'll take is trying to really capture like the teams that I think are likeliest to score touchdowns, which on the 2-game slate for me is the Ravens. No surprises there. And then in that Sunday slate, paying up for Josh Allen to me is a way that you're not going to sneak that by anybody, but looking at how it forces you into a build, it's kind of uncomfortable. So I like that just from a different standpoint, and fading the matchup against the Broncos. So yeah, in on Allen and the Bills, and then as well, Jaden Daniels in that Commanders game.
Yeah, I'll just say Ravens onslaughts will be a part of what I do. I do think Joe Mixon is an interesting leverage point in the Saturday slate. I think he's kind of interesting if you wanted to go there. I'll probably fade a lot of the Steelers. I like Mark Andrews. And then it's just hard getting away from Bucky. I keep coming back to 7K. That's just a ridiculous price tag if you want to go there. I like that one a lot. I'm trying to give like a hot take. I need a hot take here. I guess it was Zaccheaus.
Yeah, Zaccheaus, you were kind of in on. We also mentioned like the Bills wide receivers are kind of tough, but I think Shakir is a pretty strong play, just given his role against the blitz and how Denver blitzes. So I would say Shakir, Zaccheaus, maybe Isaiah Likely on the 2-game slate is kind of a sneaky play, but otherwise, just play the best plays.
Slate Breaker of the Week.
I got a great sponsor for this week's Slate Breaker bets, and it is none other than Battery Daddy. Have we talked about this before?
Sure have not.
Oh, Battery Daddy is one of those made-for-TV products that has kind of become a part of the cultural zeitgeist. It's part of who we are as a culture. And Battery Daddy is one of those products where you just basically get to upload as many batteries as possible when your family needs it. But more importantly, it's a great way to show the rival dads in your neighborhood, I'm stocked, I'm ready, and there's nothing better than having a fully stocked Battery Daddy. I'm actually going to get it out while you give your Slate Breaker. I got it right around the corner here in case I need it mid-show.
Oh, that's incredible. Yes, what a sponsor. My Slate Breaker on this slate is going to be Josh Allen. Kind of already mentioned it here, hinted at it, just bet on the team total. I am looking at it. Kyle's showing me. Great for audio. Bet on the team total here. Bet on the rushing upside in the playoffs that Josh Allen has shown. and bet on his numbers against the blitz. So give me Josh Allen as the QB1 in scoring on this slate. The only one that puts up, I'll say, more than 30 DK points.
Ooh, nice. I'm going to put our boy Ladd McConkey in there. I think he's going to be a slate breaker. The Texans' pass defense is quietly ranked 30th in fantasy points per dropback using 2 high looks over the last 6 weeks. And opponents are throwing to their first reads 73% of the time against them this year. It's the second highest rate in the NFL. In other words, what is the first read for the Chargers? What are they going to do? It's a lot of slants and it's a lot of Ladd McConkey. Play action is one of the things we've talked about a ton. His 4.43 yards per out run against play action is one of the best in the league. And so I think Ladd is a perfect price point in an offense that we want to buy into against a Texans defense that is going in the wrong direction. So what could go wrong? Betting on the Chargers once again. Bets. We're going to open up some contests, right, for Wildcard Weekend. If they want to go to ballersdfs.com.
All sorts of stuff. Yeah, we'll have one for Saturday, the Sunday slate. We'll do the 6-gamer, and then as well for Monday night for Showdown. So whatever you like to play, we'll have it for you there. And should just note real quick too, if you're in Discord, which again comes with DFS Pass, I will be in there Monday afternoon. I'm not sure the time yet, but we'll do a Q&A session for the Monday night Showdown slate. So we didn't talk about it today. So yeah, hop in Discord with me Monday afternoon. I'll give you guys an announcement closer to then and let you know what time.
Yep. It's going to be a good weekend, Wildcard Weekend, and we'll be back again next week to talk divisional round. Have a good weekend. I stole the sign off. Eat it, Betz.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com.